Picture this.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely think every single person listening to this right now has lived, some version of this exact nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. I can already guess where this is going.
Right. So, it is your very first day at a new job.
Terrifying.
Completely terrifying. Maybe it's in the tech space or a design agency, or maybe it's just a modern corporate office that, really thinks it's a tech startup.
Oh, with the ping pong tables and the exposed brick.
Yes, exactly. So you are sitting there, you've got your perfectly customized coffee order. Your desk is meticulously arranged. You've got that fresh, intimidatingly expensive notebook open, pen poised, and you are absolutely ready to conquer the world.
You feeling good?
You are. And then you step into your very first cross-functional team meeting.
Oh no. I can literally feel the blood pressure rising. That first cross-functional meeting is a rite of passage, and it's rarely a pleasant one.
It's awful, because within 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, you are absolutely hopelessly drowning. The people around the table are throwing around acronyms at a speed that suggests they're, getting paid by the letter. Someone in a very nice sweater leans forward and says, with complete sincerity, the CX is suffering because the UX isn't aligned to the UI, so the PD needs to iterate before the next sprint.
Classic. The absolute classic alphabet soup.
Right. And you just sit there, you nod slowly, maintaining aggressive eye contact so no one realizes that inside, your brain is just screaming, am I supposed to know what any of these letters mean?
Just trying to blend in with the wallpaper.
Exactly. You feel like you've been dropped into the middle of this bowl of alphabet soup and no one bothered to hand you a spoon.
It is an incredibly common anxiety, and it's something I hear from junior designers, product managers, even, senior developers who are just transitioning into new roles.
Really? Even senior people?
Oh, absolutely. And frankly, it's a barrier to entry that simply does not need to exist. We build up these massive, imposing walls of terminology.
Yeah, to sound smart.
Exactly. To sound professional, to sound specialized. But the tragic irony is that by gatekeeping these concepts behind two-letter acronyms, we make the underlying work seem far more intimidating, abstract, and mystical than it actually is.
It creates this illusion that design is this impenetrable fortress of jargon, which honestly is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today.
It's so needed.
It really is. This entire conversation is tailored specifically for you, the listener. Whether you are, just stepping into the design industry and staring down that bowl of alphabet soup, or maybe you're already in the trenches and you just want to solidify your foundational understanding.
So you can actually win those arguments in the next meeting.
Exactly. You need the vocabulary to fight back.
Yeah.
So our mission today is highly targeted. We're going to clearly break down these core design concepts. We're going to decode that alphabet soup once and for all. No jargon left unexplained. No concept left floating in the abstract.
It really is about demystifying the entire process of how digital products are actually made. Because, and here's the secret, when you understand what these terms actually represent in the physical, tangible world, they stop being scary acronyms.
Right.
They stop being weapons people use to sound smart, and they start being these powerful, practical tools that you can use to build a phenomenal career.
And to give you the absolute best tools, we're going to start this conversation by looking at Chapter 03, UI-based UX.
Such a good chapter.
It is. This is from an incredibly practical book called Design User Interface.
Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure you have access to this because it's essentially a survival manual for the modern designer. You can find it at hype4academy.gumroad.com/Lua.
Highly recommend checking that out.
Definitely. If you want to grab a copy to follow along right now, or if you just know you need to level up your career, you can buy the book right now by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below. And please make sure you follow us for more technical design breakdowns and career building content, because today is just the beginning of what we are going to unpack.
So, to really set the stage for everything we're going to explore today, we need to immediately establish the overarching hierarchy that's laid out in that chapter. Because the biggest mistake people make is treating these terms like they're just, different words for the exact same job.
Right, like they're just synonyms you can sprinkle into a resume to get past a screening algorithm.
Precisely. They aren't. They exist in a very specific structural relationship. The chapter lays it out beautifully. To visualize it, think of a macro structure. At the very top, the massive umbrella that covers absolutely everything a company does is customer experience. CX.
Okay, CX at the top.
Yep. Sitting beneath that umbrella, driving the specific functionality of the digital product, is user experience, UX.
Got it.
And then, acting as the vital, visible surface layer of that UX process is the user interface, UI. So you have this cascading dependency. UI is a crucial, non-negotiable part of the UX process, and UX is a crucial, non-negotiable part of the larger CX process.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right off the bat, before the source material even defines what these things do, it tackles a massive, incredibly stubborn elephant in the room. And I really love that it starts here.
Oh, the crayons.
Yes, the crayons. It points out this prevailing, almost toxic industry snobbery. The text highlights that the humble user interface, the UI, is constantly routinely looked down upon by quote-unquote real user experience specialists.
Yeah, the air quotes are heavily implied there.
Very heavily. They dismiss UI design as merely painting with crayons.
It's a fascinating, heavily loaded phrase, isn't it? Painting with crayons. It is incredibly condescending.
It really is.
It completely diminishes the rigorous scientific and psychological discipline required to create a functional, visually communicative interface. It reduces the entire field of visual communication to child's play.
It's so condescending. And the book firmly states that this is an entirely misguided approach. The text argues, point blank, that what we see as users is just as important as the invisible information architecture and the overarching business goals. And honestly, this elitism drives me crazy.
It's frustrating to watch happen in real time.
It is. When I was reading this, I kept trying to think of how to explain just how absurd this snobbery is.
How did you frame it? I'm curious.
Well, dismissing UI as painting with crayons is like looking at a beautifully constructed multi-million-dollar house and saying, you know what? The paint on the walls, the glass in the windows, the landscaping, the tactile feel of the doorknobs, none of that actually matters.
Right.
The only thing that makes this a real house is the fact that the concrete foundation was poured correctly and the plumbing is mathematically sound behind the drywall.
That completely ignores the human element of habitation.
Exactly. You can't just live in a raw concrete bunker with exposed PVC pipes and call it a comfortable home. You don't interact with the foundation on a daily basis.
No.
You interact with the doors. You look through the windows. The visual and tactile elements, the UI of the house, are entirely how you actually experience the structure. If the doorknob is jagged and cuts your hand, you don't care how brilliant the plumbing is.
No, you're just bleeding on the floor. That is a very strong analogy. But I want to elevate it even further to really capture the dynamic the book is describing. What's fascinating here is the historical context of why this snobbery exists in the tech industry in the first place.
Right, because it didn't just come out of nowhere.
It didn't just appear. If we look back at the early evolution of digital products in the 1980s, early 90s, there was a sharp, massive divide. You had the systems engineers. These were the hardcore programmers wiring the logic, building the databases, writing command line prompts. Functionality was everything.
Right, if you wanted the computer to do something, you had to type in a very specific string of green text on a black screen.
Exactly. It required you to learn the machine's language. The machine didn't care about you.
Definitely not.
But as computers move into homes, that had to change. Average people weren't going to learn command line prompts, so the industry started bringing in graphic designers to create graphical user interfaces, GUIs.
Yeah.
But because of the deeply entrenched engineering culture, these visual designers were often brought in at the very, very end of the process. The engineers would build the entire complex system, hand it over, and basically say, here is the software, now make it look pretty.
Like putting a fresh coat of paint over a finished engine.
Yes. Exactly. And that legacy created a completely false dichotomy between function and form.
Yeah.
It created this enduring bias that the real work is the invisible logic, and the visual design is just a superficial afterthought. It's just crayons.
Wow, so it's a deeply historical prejudice.
Very much so. But if we look at the hierarchy, the source material establishes CX, UX, USI. The text rigorously defends a much more holistic reality. Building a truly great product requires taking care of every little detail with intense scientific precision.
And visuals are the front line of that precision. They're the very first thing the user encounters.
Absolutely. If we expand your house analogy into a high-end restaurant, I think we capture the nuance perfectly. The customer experience, the CX, is the valet parking your car, the reputation of the chef, the ease of making a reservation.
Yeah.
The user experience, the UX, is the layout of the dining room and the flow of the kitchen. Are the tables spaced far enough apart so waiters don't bump into you? Is the menu logically structured so you understand the courses? That is the UX blueprint.
Okay, I am with you. So where does the UI come in, the crayons?
The UI is the plating of the food. It is the weight of the silverware in your hand. It is the specific warmth of the lighting over your table. The UX snob would argue that as long as the food is cooked to the proper temperature and delivered efficiently, the job is done.
Right, you get your food, what's the problem?
Exactly. The plating doesn't matter. It's just decoration. But anyone who has ever eaten at a Michelin star restaurant knows that the visual presentation profoundly alters the perception of taste. The weight of the fork changes how you feel about the meal. The UI is the only part of the system the user actually touches and ingests.
That makes so much sense. If the food is served on a chipped, dirty plate under harsh fluorescent lighting, the brilliant kitchen flow of the UX is completely irrelevant. The experience is ruined.
Precisely. You can have the most robust, flawlessly coded database in the world. You can have it mapped out with brilliant, empathetic information architecture. But if the user cannot visually parse the screen to find the submit button because the contrast ratio between the text and the background is poor, the entire multi-million-dollar system fails.
Just because of a color choice.
Just because of a color choice. If the typography is so small it causes eye strain, the user leaves. To diminish that visual layer to crayons is to fundamentally misunderstand how human biology and psychology interact with machines. The interface is the physical manifestation of all that underlying strategy.
So to zoom in on that physical manifestation, let's really get into the weeds of the UI, the user interface, because this is where the magic becomes tangible. The text defines UI as the visual representation of a digital product. Obviously, we're talking about apps, websites, software dashboards.
Sure.
But it goes deeper. It calls it the literal link between the user and the functionality. It is how you achieve a desired outcome through a series of human-machine interactions.
And notice the incredibly specific components the text lists to define this link. It isn't just making things pretty.
Right.
UI is defined as a complex mix of grid systems, layout architecture, typography, color theory, animations, and micro-interactions. It is all that we experience, mostly with our eyes when we look at a screen.
The book gives a really fantastic, highly specific visual example to ground this theory, which they refer to as random soda. Imagine you are scrolling through an e-commerce site or a modern grocery delivery app, and you see a product cart.
Okay, painting the picture.
The text describes this UI in detail. It shows a sleek silver can of soda. But it's not just a flat image. The can is covered in these little hyper-realistic condensation droplets. There are bright, vivid green mint leaves floating in the negative space around the can.
That was refreshing.
Right. The typography is crisp and modern. It boldly states the name Random Soda. It clearly displays the price as $5 with perfect hierarchy, and it has a short, highly legible descriptive text. Refreshing carbonated soda with a mint flavor. And finally, right below all of that, anchored to the bottom, is the highly visible distinct button that says, plus add to cart.
That single product card is a masterclass in what UI actually is. It is a perfect microcosm, because a junior designer might look at that and think, okay, my job is to draw a nice can and pick a cool font.
Paint with the crayons.
Paint with the crayons. But the UI designer's actual job, as outlined in the source, is to define a unique style, ensure it fits the specific psychology of the target market, and make absolutely certain it is readable, usable, and completely devoid of distracting elements.
So let's break down the psychology of that, because you mentioned scientific precision earlier.
Yeah.
Why the condensation droplets? Why floating mint leaves? Is that just to make it look cool?
Not at all. Every single pixel serves a psychological function. The condensation droplets are there to trigger a visceral, biological response.
Biological?
Yes. Before your conscious brain even reads the word soda, your visual cortex processes the texture of water droplets on silver metal, which signals coldness. If you are thirsty, your brain immediately registers relief.
Oh, wow.
The vivid green of the mint leaves taps into color psychology. Green universally signals freshness, nature, and vitality. It cuts through the sterile digital environment of a screen.
Okay, that is fascinating. It's essentially hacking the user's thirst before they even read the copy.
Exactly. And then look at the layout. The price $5 needs a specific font weight. It cannot be hidden, because hiding the price creates cognitive friction and distrust.
Yeah, if I can't find the price, I assume I can't afford it.
Exactly. But it also shouldn't be larger than the product itself. The specific shade of green for the mint leaves needs to contrast perfectly with the silver can. None of that is an accident. It is meticulously engineered visual communication designed to evoke a feeling of refreshment, build instant trust, and drive the user toward one specific, highly profitable action, clicking that Add to Cart button.
Which brings me to my absolute favorite part of this entire chapter. It is a quote that is so good, I genuinely think every designer, developer, and product manager should have it framed on their desk.
I know exactly the one you mean.
The text says, and I quote, "An interface is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not that good."
It is brilliant in its simplicity, and it perfectly encapsulates the ultimate goal of the discipline.
But it immediately makes me wonder, and this is where I want to push back on how easy this is supposed to be.
Yeah.
If UI is everything we experience mostly with our eyes, this massive combination of grids, text hierarchies, psychological color choices, and animations, how incredibly difficult is it to design something that requires zero explanation?
It's incredibly difficult.
Because, let's be honest, just telling a good verbal joke at a dinner party is hard enough. Designing a digital screen that a million different people from different cultures with different levels of tech literacy instantly understand without a user manual, that seems like borderline magic.
Yeah.
How does a UI designer actually ensure the joke lands?
It feels like magic to the user, but on the designer side, it is actually applied cognitive psychology and rigorous visual hierarchy. When the quote compares an interface to a joke, we really need to look at the mechanics of humor. What makes a joke work? It is the immediate, completely frictionless transfer of meaning.
Right. If you have to pause and say, wait, so the chicken was on the highway because the laugh is gone, the momentum is dead.
Exactly. With a joke, if the setup is too long or the punchline is obscured by unnecessary details, the timing is ruined. You have to stop, explain the context, and the cognitive effort required to understand the joke kills the involuntary joy of the laugh. In user interface design, the laugh is the user successfully achieving their goal without experiencing any cognitive friction.
So if I'm looking at that random soda product card and I have to read a paragraph of tiny instructions just to figure out how to put that $5 mint soda in my digital shopping cart, the joke is dead. The design has failed.
Precisely. The text emphasizes that UI combines text, shapes, and graphics specifically to allow for a fluid, natural interaction. Let's break down how that fluidity is achieved mechanically, using the concepts from the text. When a UI designer uses a grid system, they aren't just aligning boxes to be neat, they're leveraging cognitive science. Human eyes, particularly in Western cultures, naturally scan digital screens in an F pattern or Z pattern, top left to top right, down and across.
Oh, interesting. So you don't just put the button wherever it looks prettiest.
No. A grid creates a subconscious rhythm for the eye to follow. The designer places the image of the soda where the eye lands first. They place the descriptive text where the eye naturally moves next. And they place that crucial plus add to cart button at the exact terminal point of that Z pattern, right where the user's eye naturally wants to rest. The user doesn't know they are following a grid, they just feel like the information flows effortlessly.
It's invisible guidance.
Exactly. And when they use typography, they aren't just picking fun fonts, they are using size and weight to signal what information is a primary heading the setup and what is secondary detail, and then we have micro-interactions, which are the unsung heroes of UI.
The text mentions micro-interactions, but what does that actually mean in practice?
A micro-interaction is a tiny functional animation. Think about that Add to Cart button. When you hover your mouse over it or when your thumb presses it on a touchscreen, the button might slightly change color. It might depress a few pixels. It might give a tiny haptic buzz on your phone.
Oh, I notice it all the time on my phone.
Right. That isn't just decoration. That is the machine providing immediate, visceral feedback. It is the interface whispering to the user, I hear you. The action was registered.
That provides so much security. Without that tiny flash of color, you end up mashing the button 5 times because you weren't sure if the app is frozen.
Exactly. Mashing the button is the equivalent of yelling, "Did you hear my joke?" True UI is a meticulously crafted visual language. The ultimate goal, the absolute pinnacle of the craft, is to guide the user to their desired outcome without them ever consciously realizing they're being guided.
They just click, the soda goes to the
Yeah.
cart, and it feels as natural as picking up a physical can in a grocery store.
Precisely. If they have to stop and consciously think, what does this little star icon mean? Or where did the navigation menu go? Okay, you force them to analyze the interface. You've had to explain the joke. The cognitive load spikes, frustration sets in, and the user experience immediately degrades.
Which brings us, logically and perfectly, to the next layer of the macrostructure UX user experience. If the UI is the look, the feel, the F patterns, and the micro-interactions. The text tells us that UX is the discipline that defines how it works and how easy it is to use.
Yes, the how.
The explicitly stated goal of UX is to allow the largest possible group of users the ability to understand and use a product. It is the structural blueprint.
Yes, and this is where we transition from visual communication into an investigative discipline. This involves entirely different methodologies than UI. The text points out that UX encompasses information architecture planning. It is rooted in diverse research methods: surveys, A/B tests, focus groups, interviews, workshops.
To illustrate this shift from visual to structural, the chapter does something really clever. It goes back to that exact same random soda example, but it strips away all of the polished UI. All the crayons are gone. We aren't looking at condensation droplets or perfectly color-balanced mint leads anymore.
It's naked.
Completely naked. Instead, it shows us a basic wireframe, just gray boxes and lines indicating where things should go. But more importantly, it shows us the actual user comments that the UX research phase gathered about this layout.
This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where designer assumptions are tested against brutal human reality.
Right, because designers are not the users. So the text shows us user feedback on this initial wireframe, and it says things like, "The buttons were too small. I often pressed the wrong one by accident."
Very common.
Another user tester says, "A short description right on the product miniature would be great, so I can see the flavor right away without having to click into a new page." And a third piece of feedback says, "I'd love an option to add this to a list so I can consider purchasing it at a later date."
Those three comments are pure UX gold. They are the entire reason the discipline exists. They highlight critical friction points that the visual design alone, the beautiful UI plating, could not possibly anticipate without actually watching a human being try to use the product.
But here is where I get a little tripped up. Here's where I really want to push back on the boundaries between these roles. Because the textbook definitions sound clean, but reality is messy.
Always is.
The text explicitly states, UI is a part of user experience because readability and looks are also influencing the ease of use. If that is the absolute truth, where does one job actually end and the other begin for someone who's just starting their career?
That's the million-dollar question.
Let's look at that first user comment. The buttons were too small. If a user is complaining about the physical size of a visual element on a screen, is that a UX research problem or is that a UI design problem? Who owns that failure?
This raises an important question, and it is the exact question that trips up a lot of agile teams and creates friction in those cross-functional meetings we talked about at the beginning. The reality is the boundary between UX and UI is not a hard wall. It is intentionally, necessarily porous. Let's go back to our restaurant analogy. UX is the flow of the kitchen and the layout of the dining room. UI is the plating and the physical furniture.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The UX researcher is like the restaurant manager watching the dining room during the dinner rush. They observe that waiters keep bumping into the chairs at table 4. The customers are getting annoyed. That is the UX finding. The structural layout is causing navigational errors and frustrating the user.
The blueprint has a fundamental flaw.
Exactly. The blueprint failed upon contact with reality, but the solution to that flaw bridges directly into UI territory. The UX designer might say, we need a wider pathway between tables, but they don't just rip out the tables themselves. The UI designer takes that structural requirement and decides how to visually and physically implement it.
I see.
Do we change the grid of the room? Do we buy new, visually stunning chairs that have a smaller footprint? The UX research dictated that the physical space needed to change for functional reasons, but the UI designer ensures that the change maintains the aesthetic harmony, the unique style, and the mood of the restaurant.
I love that. Let's
Yeah.
apply that directly to the tiny button on the random soda app.
Perfect. So, the UX researcher conducts a focus group and watches a user try to tap the Add to Cart button with their thumb on a mobile phone. The user keeps accidentally hitting the Cancel button next to it. In cognitive psychology, there is a concept called Fitts law.
Fitts law.
Yes, Fitts, Fitts law, which essentially states that the time required to rapidly move to a target area is a function of the distance to the target and the size of the target. A small button right next to a destructive action like cancel violates this law. It creates fat finger errors.
So I hate that when you go to save something and you accidentally delete it.
Exactly. The user gets frustrated, cortisol spikes, they abandon the cart.
So the UX researcher logs the finding. Target area too small causes error.
Yes. The UX team has identified the friction. But they don't just slap a giant, ugly neon button over the delicate UI. They hand that finding to the UI designer. The UI designer then has to solve the functional problem visually.
How do they do that without making it look terrible?
Well, do they alter the baseline grid to create more negative space? Do they increase the padding around the text inside the button? Do they change the color contrast so the primary action is visually heavier than the secondary action? The UX research dictated the need for a change. The UI designer executes the how while preserving the visual integrity.
And what about the user who asked for the flavor description right on the miniature? I want to see the flavor right away. That feels like pure UX information architecture.
It is. The user is asking for more information higher up in the hierarchy. That is a UX request. But how do you put more text onto a small product card without cluttering the beautiful image of the soda can and overwhelming the user's cognitive load? Placing that text beautifully, selecting the right font weight so it is readable, but secondary to the price that is entirely UI.
So they're constantly necessarily in conversation with each other? It is a symbiotic relationship?
Deeply symbiotic.
The UI is the final, tangible refinement of the UX blueprint. It isn't a factory assembly line where UX does their job, hands off a wireframe, and they never speak to the UI team again. It is a continuous, iterative loop of testing the function and refining the form.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness is exactly why the text insists that dismissing UI as crayons is not just condescending, it is actively dangerous to the product's success. A bad UI can completely ruin brilliant, expensive UX research.
Wow, really ruin it entirely.
Yes. If the UX team spends months proving that users desperately want a favorites list to save items for later, but the UI team designs a favorites icon that looks slightly too much like a delete trash can, the ease of use absolutely plummets. Nobody uses the feature because the visual language betrayed the structural intent. Readability and looks directly mathematically influence the ease of use.
Okay, so we've got the interface beautifully plated. We've got the experience running smoothly in the kitchen. Let's pull all the way back to that biggest umbrella. Customer experience, or CX. The text makes a very strong point that CX is often confused with UX by people throwing around jargon, but they're absolutely not the same thing.
Not even close.
CX is the macro-level process. The text defines it as not just how the digital product works, but how the entire company operates across every single touch point.
Yes. This is where we step outside the digital screen entirely. The text states that the CX process includes the UX of your app, absolutely, but it also includes your branding strategy, your marketing campaigns, your return policy, and even the tone of voice of the friendly customer support rep on your telephone hotline.
That is huge.
It is the absolute macro view of the entire holistic relationship between the human consumer and the corporate brand.
The book gives a couple of fantastic examples to show just how broad and impactful this really is. One is about merging the digital and the real world. It mentions how the ability to order a coffee on an app and then walk in and pick up that exact order in the physical brick-and-mortar store was a total game changer for the industry.
That example is the purest distillation of CX. Let's break it down using our framework. The UI is the beautifully designed, mouth-watering image of the caramel latte and the perfectly sized green button you push on your phone screen.
Okay.
The UX is the frictionless architecture that allowed you to customize your milk preference and pay with Apple Pay in under 10 seconds.
Right, the app works flawlessly. The digital joke landed perfectly.
But the CX is the moment you push open the heavy glass door of the physical store. The CX is the fact that the ambient music in the store matches the vibe of the app. The CX is the reality that your coffee is waiting on the counter, it is actually hot, your name is spelled correctly on the cup, and the barista makes eye contact and smiles at you.
So if the app is a masterpiece of UX and UI, but the barista ignores you and the coffee is ice cold, the CX has catastrophically failed.
Completely.
And the customer doesn't care that the app was pretty. They blame the brand.
Precisely. The user doesn't compartmentalize their disappointment. They don't say, well, the UI was excellent, but the physical fulfillment UX was lacking. They just say, I hate this company. I'm going somewhere else.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. The text explicitly includes copywriting as a core, fundamental element of designing customer experience. It says CX rules even influence the way you write your copy. And it gives this amazing, highly specific example of a popular fitness app.
I love this example.
The app originally had a button at the end of a grueling workout with a standard, perfectly functional, boring message. Save your workout. Someone on the team decided to change the text on that exact same button to say, I'm awesome. And the text notes that customer engagement actually went up.
It is a remarkable case study in psychology.
But I have to play devil's advocate here, because if I'm a junior designer hearing this, I'm skeptical. You are telling me that changing 3 words, "save your workout," to "I'm awesome," actually moves the needle on user retention. It is just a button. It performs the exact same database function. Does copywriting really have that much power?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human behavioral psychology, we realize how deeply emotional CX really is. Let's look at the context. The user has just finished a grueling physical workout. Their body is tired. From a systems engineering perspective, save your workout is a perfectly logical, purely functional instruction. It is a command to write data to the server.
Right, it's just a database entry.
But from a human perspective, it frames the interaction as a chore. It is administrative work you have to do before you can go take a shower.
It's filing paperwork.
Exactly, it's a task. But "I'm awesome" is a celebration. It taps into intrinsic motivation. It shifts the user's interaction from a mechanical chore to an emotional reward. When the user taps "I'm awesome," the digital product is essentially giving them a high five. It triggers a tiny hit of dopamine.
Wow.
That emotional resonance creates positive reinforcement, which makes the user want to open the app again tomorrow to get that high five again.
It completely alters the emotional resonance of the entire brand. The brand transforms from a cold database tracker into a supportive digital coach. And it didn't require a massive new software feature. It didn't require months of coding. It required 3 different words crafted with immense empathy.
Precisely. You design customer experience by defining clear, consistent, empathetic rules for your entire brand across all touchpoints. The text also mentions a visual example of this macro impact. It notes that changing the brand colors to a positive green gradient yielded an improvement in user perception of our brand.
Just a color shift.
Just a gradient change. Now, strictly speaking, changing a color gradient is a UI choice. It happens on the screen. But because that specific green gradient subtly shifted the overall psychological perception of the brand's identity, perhaps making them feel more eco-friendly or more energetic, it rippled all the way up the hierarchy to fundamentally improve the customer experience.
It's all connected. The text states that all of these elements, the visuals, the structure, the physical stores, the copy, must combine for a consistent, coherent vision with which our potential customer can quickly identify. Whether it's the friendly tone of the hotline operator, the psychological comfort of the green gradient, or the dopamine hit of the "I'm awesome" button, every single touch point has to feel like it is coming from the exact same unified personality.
And achieving that level of consistency across a global product is incredibly difficult to maintain as a company scales. If your UI designers don't talk to your UX researchers, and neither of them talks to the copywriters or the customer support team, the brand fractures. Which is exactly why the industry has started to aggressively evolve its terminology and its job roles to manage this massive complexity.
Right. Which brings us to the final critical section of our deep dive, the evolution of the designer. Because the chapter reveals a massive paradigm shift happening right now in the job market. It notes that in the last few years, many professionals who previously held the title UX designer have actively started calling themselves product designers instead.
The text provides a very clear, pragmatic rationale for this shift. It explains that as the industry has matured, the title UX designer has simply become too vague.
Too vague. How so?
It is a catch-all term that doesn't actually tell you what specific skills the person sitting across from you possesses. A UX designer at one company might be a high-level product owner driving business strategy. At another company, they might be a dedicated academic researcher who only runs focus groups. At a startup, they might just be someone who quickly wires together gray boxes on a screen. Or they might be attempting to do all of those things simultaneously.
It's like calling someone a medical professional. Are you a brain surgeon or a pharmacist? I need to know before you operate on me.
Exactly, it's not helpful.
So to clear up this immense confusion, the industry introduces the concept of the product designer. And the book gives us a literal mathematical formula for this modern role. It states product design equals user interface plus user experience plus basic research. It is this ultimate cross-disciplinary hybrid role. The text even notes that some people in the industry describe product design as user experience design 2.0.
It represents a shift from specialization back to a holistic approach. By formally merging UX structural competencies with UI visual execution and basic foundational research, a product designer is equipped to solve a much wider, more complex range of potential problems. They aren't siloed into just conducting the interview, or just making the wireframe, or just choosing the hex codes for the colors. They own the problem from inception to execution.
So what does this all mean for your career? If you are the listener Sitting there on your first day looking at this terrifying alphabet soup on the whiteboard, why should you actively care about this shift toward product design?
Because, as the text explicitly states, a true product designer is often the most versatile and therefore the most valuable person in the entire company. They are the linchpin.
The linchpin.
They are someone who can speak the language of business processes to the stakeholders, choose the right structural building approach with the UX team, and physically execute the final beautiful interface designs. They can guide the rest of the team, including translating design intent to the developers writing the code. For someone entering the modern job market, understanding and embracing this evolution is absolutely crucial for your longevity.
If you only understand how to make pretty buttons UI, or you only understand how to run a focus group UX research, your impact is severely limited to one tiny station on the assembly line.
Exactly. You are easily replaceable. But if you embrace the product designer mindset, if you understand how the basic human research informs the structural UX blueprint, and how that blueprint is beautifully realized through the psychological visual language of the UI, all in service of creating a cohesive, emotional, macro CX, you become invaluable. You become the rare person who can actually see the entire board.
You stop being just a cog in the machine, waiting for someone to hand you a wireframe, and you become the architect who understands why the machine was built in the first place.
Precisely. You are no longer just the person brought in at the end and told to paint it with crayons. You are intimately involved in defining the core human problem, researching the viable solution, structuring the frictionless experience, and polishing the final interface until it feels like magic. It requires a tremendous amount of empathy for the user, a solid grasp of human psychology, and a deep, practical understanding of business goals.
It's so empowering to look at it that way. What started an hour ago as this terrifying, gatekeeping, alphabet soup UI, UX, CX, PD is actually just a logical roadmap of how a great abstract idea becomes a real tangible thing that people actually love to use.
The terminology is just there to help cross-functional teams communicate effectively about the different altitudes of the work. Once you know which altitude you're flying at, the acronyms lose their power to intimidate you.
Let's synthesize this whole incredible journey we've been on today. We started by aggressively busting the myth of the crayons, the toxic idea that visual design is somehow a lesser, superficial discipline. We learned that the user interface is actually a meticulous, psychologically driven visual language of grids, color theory, and micro-interactions designed to guide a user effortlessly, ensuring the digital joke lands perfectly without explanation.
Right.
We then explored how the user experience acts as the vital structural blueprint beneath that visual layer, using rigorous research, Fitts law, and user feedback to ensure the product is fundamentally easy to navigate.
We then zoomed all the way out to the macro level of customer experience, seeing how every single touch point, from the friction of an app button, to the warmth of an in-store pickup, to the specific emotional phrasing of the copywriting, must align perfectly to create a coherent, trustworthy brand identity.
And finally, we saw how all of these seemingly disparate disciplines are merging into the versatile, highly impactful, holistic role of the modern product designer. It really is a comprehensive roadmap for a successful modern design career.
It is a roadmap that demands continuous curiosity, deep human empathy, and a willingness to constantly look beyond your specific silo to see how your work impacts the whole.
Absolutely. And listener, if you want to keep exploring this roadmap, if you want to arm yourself with the absolute best tools to navigate your career, I cannot highly recommend enough checking out the source material for yourself. Once again, all of these incredible foundational insights come directly from Chapter 03, UI versus UX of the book Design User Interface. You can go to hype4academy.gumroad.com/Sliway book, scan the QR code of the book link provided in the description below to buy the book, and really dig deep into these concepts. And please explicitly request, make sure you follow us for more technical design breakdowns and career building content, because the industry moves fast and there's always more to unpack.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final practical thought to ponder as you go about your day. Think about that I'm awesome button from the fitness app we discussed. A tiny, seemingly irrelevant change in copywriting that fundamentally shifted the entire emotional weight of the product and drove up retention. As you move through both the digital and physical world today, whether you are ordering lunch on a kiosk, navigating a new piece of software, or just walking through a grocery store, pay attention. Ask yourself what tiny, seemingly insignificant interfaces, colors, or words are quietly successfully shaping your own behavior right now. And how can you, as an emerging designer, harness that exact same invisible power to make your users' lives just a little bit better?
Next time you are sitting in a cross-functional meeting and someone starts throwing around the alphabet soup, You won't just be nodding along in terror. You will know exactly how the pieces fit together. You finally got your spoon.